Let me start rolling tape. Tell me about the, you were saying the transmitters in the planes. You had experience as a civilian prior to going into the military?
No. Story was I got out of college and the next 2 days came a draft notice. You report for induction, 21 years old. So I went in the military real quick. Air Force Reserves. I got into C-119s as an airborne radio operator, and that airplane came out in the early 50s, and it had the ART-13 and BC-348, and my function was anytime we went out over water, which we did a lot of, I did all the communications with the ground stations up in the 6, 7, 8, 10, 11 megacycle ranges, giving position reports and everything along our flight and whatnot. So I was the communications link between the airplane and Mother Earth when we were 1, 2, 500, 1,000 miles out over water. Over.
Roger. And what kind of power were you running on those planes?
Just a straight ART-13, about 110, 115 watts output. BC-348 receivers. They were all carryovers from World War II, because sideband, the Air Force had really not gotten into sideband yet. Maybe on brand new stuff, but not the old antiques we were flying over.
Roger. And you were using like a Dynamo to get the high voltage for the transmitters?
Yeah, it was a 24-volt DC system, all the battery system. We were using basically a 1,000-volt dynamotor and some 300-volt dynamotors for the ART-13 and the BC-348.
Roger. So the high voltage for the transmitter, did that dynamotor run all the time or just when you were transmitting?
Push to talk, only.
So actually you kind of faded in?
Yep, it spun up real fast. I had one here at home that I made a mobile one time, put 24 volts DC in a car, had an ART-13 in the trunk of my car.
Roger. So then as far as antennas, what were they like?
65-foot long wire. 65-foot long wire from the top of the fuselage right near the crew compartment back to one of the tails. It's 119 had a twin tail on it. Back to the tail of the 119.
Roger. Did you have to run an antenna tuner to make that work?
No. We could load it because it was an ELL Network. Now, on the old B-29s and them, they also had a very low frequency They had a low frequency antenna tuner if they wanted to go down into the broadcast band like 1.345 megacycles, which they were doing in World War II. And that was an external antenna tuner, external RF antenna tuner unit hooked onto the ART-13, but that was a special box by itself to go below 2 megacycles to transmit receive.
Roger. I was just curious now, since you've got this long wire running the length of the plane, radiation would be off to the sides. If you were to have a radio silence situation and you needed to communicate, would you feel that you could drop the power down and transmit horizontally to the planes in your flight and not be detected in a forward situation?
No, we never had anything like radio silence. Maybe they did in Korean War where the airplanes were, but if there was an emergency, we break radio silence. We're going down, that kind of radio silence. No, it was just strictly air-to-ground communications from the airplane to the ground for, long range, for HF operation.
Roger. And were you mainly in squadrons or individual planes?
Well, I was in a wing which had 2 squadrons, but every airplane was equipped with the same kind of radio transmitter. We had 34 C-119s, and so any airplane you went into, you had the same HF situation.
Roger. And what was the durability of that type of equipment at that time? Did you have much trouble keeping it running?
No. We had a spare parts box. I did have an 813 go out. The filaments went out in an overwater flight one time, and I knew what it was. I could just look back and see A13 dead. We had a spare parts box of tubes, and I had the flight engineer go back and get one and pull that thing out and put a new tube in it. The pilots and all the guys up front thought I was Marconi.
Roger, and it was just a dead filament?
Dead filament, yep, they did go bad. I mean, we're looking at equipment that was made now in the mid-40s to late 40s.
Roger, roger. And what's the highest frequency that you would operate VFO?
1122.8. We had a couple ground stations up at an 11 megacycle range. For example, I could be at the Caribbean at nighttime over the Caribbean. I couldn't get into Miami or any place, but I could always go up to 11.2 and get into New York radio to give my position report, and they relay it back to Miami Center.
Roger. And you were running AM or sideband?
AM, and CW. Didn't have sideband at that time. Not in these airplanes.
Roger, roger. And so you had a key there on you had like a tabletop that you were working on?
Yes, sir. J38 key. I'm the ham radio operator at the time, and that's one reason they grabbed me, because I had a ham radio license, and I knew more than the kids coming out of communications school knew.
Roger. Well, I'm sure the CW aspect was about 90% of the push that they needed to grab you, you know.
Yeah, that was it. You had to learn all that in radio school. You had to learn Morse code.
Right, and I'm sure the dropout rate for that, I mean, there's just some people that are not suited for CW. They just can't, can't get their head wrapped around the procedure to copy CW.
Yeah, I only did it because of a requirement for a license. I didn't enjoy it.
So how many words did you have to do then?
I did 15, and I did my extra class of 20.
Wow, that's pretty quick. Did they eventually drop that down some, I think?
Well, I'm talking ham radio now, but you had to do 13 words a minute at the technical school.
Roger, I can do 2 words, help and hello, I think, or SOS and hello.
Okay, we'll get off one-to-one and have a long conversation about it when, the guys get tired here. Bruce, any more comments?